Hello students, welcome to this lecture on evolving landscape of minority rights. The 21st century has redefined the scope of minority rights globally. While the 20th century focused on legal recognition and non-discrimination, the current era emphasizes inclusion, representation and digital equality. India, home to one of the world's most diverse populations, faces both progress and challenges in ensuring equal participation of minorities. Internationally, frameworks such as the UN Declaration on the Rights of Persons belonging to national or ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities, dated 1992, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights and OIC's Cairo Declaration influence national practices. In India, legal safeguards exist, but social realities ranging from online hate speech to media exclusion demand renewed attention. The rise of social media has transformed both representation and discrimination. Globalization has interconnected minority issues, requiring countries to balance sovereignty with human rights norms. This lecture explores contemporary global and Indian trends, examining policy reforms, international commitments, digital challenges, and comparative perspectives to assess how India aligns with emerging global standards of minority protection and equality in the 21st century. United Nations has been the principal architect of global minority protection standards. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights laid the foundation for equality, while the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights (ICPR) 1966 recognized minority identity under Article 27. The UN Declaration on Minorities further advanced protection through cultural, linguistic, and religious autonomy. The United Nations Human Rights Council (HRC) established mechanisms like the Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues to monitor compliance. The UNESCO Convention on Cultural Diversity 2005 links minority protection to cultural rights. India, as a signatory to the ICCPR and ICESCR, periodically submits national reports highlighting its progress in education, representation, and social inclusion. However, United Nations reviews often cite implementation gaps and instances of social discrimination. Global standards demand both institutional protection and social empowerment. The UN approach thus moves beyond tolerance towards substantive equality, ensuring minorities not only survive but thrive as equal contributors to their national democratic fabric. European Union and comparative global practices. The European Union offers a structured model for minority protection, emphasizing anti-discrimination and social cohesion. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights 2000 and the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities 1995 promote equality in education, employment, and media representation. Countries like Finland, Belgium, and Spain provide autonomy to linguistic minorities, integrating diversity into governance. The European Court of Human Rights (ECHR) has consistently upheld cases on religious freedom, hate speech, and minority expression. Outside Europe, Canada's multiculturalism policy and South Africa's post apartheid constitution exemplifies legal pluralism balanced with equality. Comparatively, India's secularism offers similar constitutional guarantees but differ in implementation. While Europe uses institutionalized equality, India relies on moral and constitutional ethos. The EU's structured monitoring mechanisms, annual progress reports, funding for minority inclusion, and hate speech legislation provide valuable lessons. Learning from these models, India can enhance transparency, community participation, and independent oversight to ensure minority rights are not symbolic but substantively realized. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, representing 57 nations, has developed its own human rights framework, emphasizing religious freedom and non discrimination. The Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam 1990 and the OIC Declaration on Human Rights 2020 reaffirm equality for minorities while rooted in Islamic ethical values. While OIC members commit to justice and cultural diversity, challenges persist in ensuring full equality for religious and ethnic minorities within some member states. India, though not an OIC member, engages diplomatically with its frameworks during multilateral dialogues. OIC has occasionally expressed concerns over the treatment of Muslim minorities globally. While India emphasizes its constitutional protections and democratic governance, questions are raised on India's on the status of minorities, particularly the Muslim minorities, by these countries and organizations. These interactions highlight the tension between international perception and domestic policies or domestic perceptions. The OIC focuses on moral rights, community dignity, and dialogue based coexistence complements United Nations framework, showing how global minority protection discourses can emerge from diverse civilizational perspectives yet converge on equality and justice. India's compliance with the global standards. India is a signatory to major UN treaties, including ICCPR, ICESCR, and CEDAW, committing to non discrimination and equality. National laws such as Protection of Civil Rights Act 1995, National Commission for Minorities Act 1992, Right to Education Act 2009 align with these principles. India's Universal Periodic Review submissions to the UN Human Rights Council highlights achievements in literacy, representation, and social welfare amongst minorities. However, international observers often point out gaps between policy and practices, particularly in combating hate crime, communal violence, and digital hate speech. India asserts its secular, plural framework guaranteeing equality for all faiths, emphasizing unity in diversity. India, perhaps having one of the best constitutions in the world, giving extraordinary protections to the minorities and special mechanisms and institutions to take care of the minority rights. The challenge lies in balancing cultural autonomy with universal rights standards. Strengthening data transparency, minority representation, grievance redressal mechanism could enhance compliance. However, one thing that I would like to emphasize here is that compliance requires not only the existence of law, legal mechanisms, and efforts on the part of the state, but efforts on the part of the community also towards contributing to secular democratic fabric by restraining from hate speeches on their part also, and of course violence and other kinds of discriminations that minority may be practicing where they are in majority in many places in India. The 21st century challenges hate speech and online polarization. Digital revolution has amplified both freedom of expression and discrimination. Online platforms have become sites of communal polarization. Hate campaigns from both the majority as well as the minority communities, and stereotyping against any individual who is vulnerable, whether whether he or she belongs to the majority or to the minority, against women, against the people who are in minority anywhere. India's Information Technology Act 2000 and its intermediary guidelines 2021 attempts to curb hate speech, but enforcement remains uneven. Supreme Court rulings emphasize that hate speech undermines constitutional morality and social harmony. And this ruling is for everyone, whether you belong to majority or to the minority. Internationally, the UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech 2019 urges government to balance free speech with dignity. EU Digital Service Act 2022 requires social media accountability for hate content. In India, minority representation in digital media is limited, and hate speech often intersects with misinformation. Civil society and fact checking networks play crucial roles in countering narratives that deepen divides. The global trend shows that combating hate speech requires multi layered solutions legal, technological, and educational, ensuring that freedom of expression empowers democracy rather than fragment it. Communal harmony and interfaith relations. Communal harmony remains central to India's identity as a secular democracy. Government initiatives like Sadbhavna Mission, Ek Bharat Shresht Bharat and Qawmi Ekta Week and also interfaith societies promote unity through cultural exchange. Yet, data from the National Crime Record Bureau shows periodic spikes in communal incidents. The Supreme Court has repeatedly emphasized the state's duty to prevent violence and protect all faiths equally. Internationally, the UN Alliance of Civilization and OECD promote interfaith dialogue as a means of peace building. Comparative studies reveal that education and community partnerships are the most effective tools for harmony. India's grassroots efforts, such as peace committees and interreligious youth programs, offer valuable examples of plural coexistence. However, these need institutional strengthening and continuous monitoring. Sustainable communal harmony depends on transforming coexistence into collaboration, where delivery becomes a strength, not a source of division. India's plural heritage remain its greatest asset for achieving constitutional secularism in practice. Digital discrimination and algorithmic bias. While expanding digital governance, with expanding digital governance, minority rights now extend into cyberspace. Algorithmic bias in social media, digital banking, and AI systems can perpetuate structural exclusion. Internationally, the UNESCO recommendations on the Ethics of Artificial Intelligence 2021 and EU AI Act 2023 address these risks, mandating fairness and transparency in algorithmic design. In India, AI driven platforms used in credit scoring, hiring, and policing have raised concerns of hidden bias. Studies by Niti Aayog and independent researchers show underrepresentation of minorities and women per se in tech development, leading to unintentional discrimination. The Personal Data Protection Act of 2023 introduces safeguards but lacks explicit anti discrimination clauses. Global experience indicates that digital inclusion policies must address access, representation, and accountability together. For minorities, digital empowerment means more than connectivity. It requires equitable participation in shaping technologies. Addressing algorithmic discrimination ensures that the digital revolution strengthens democracy and equality for all rather than reinforcing social hierarchies. Minority representation in media and public discourse. Media plays a decisive role in shaping perceptions about minorities. However, research by CSDS and Oxfam India shows underrepresentation of minorities in mainstream newsroom and leadership roles. Television debates and digital platforms often portray minorities through political or religious stereotypes, reducing diversity to identity politics. The Press Council of India and News Broadcast Association have issued guidelines on balanced coverage, but enforcement is weak. Global examples like the BBC Diversity Charter and EU Media Pluralism Monitor highlight how inclusion can enhance credibility. In India, minority journalists and community media outlets such as TrueCircles.net and Maktub Media are creating alternative narratives. Representation is not only ethical but democratic, ensuring all voices are heard in public life. Encouraging diversity in media ownership, uh, newsroom recruitment, and public broadcasting can reshape discourse from polarization to pluralism, reflecting the inclusive spirit envisioned in the Constitution and international human rights standards. Globalization, migration, and transnational minorities. Globalization has expanded the concept of minority rights beyond national borders. Migration, displacement, and diaspora communities have created transnational minorities with complex identities. The UN Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration 2018 and the OHCHR principles on the protection of migrants emphasize non-discrimination and cultural inclusion. In Europe, refugees inflow have reviewed debates on multiculturalism and integration. For India, with a diaspora exceeding 32 million, minority protection also extends outwards, ensuring rights of Indians abroad and managing refugee inflow from neighboring countries. India's response to Rohingya refugees and Afghan minorities reflect the tension between security and humanitarian commitment. So every state is governed by the realist school of international relations, that it is the interest of the country which is primary to anything else. The question also arises whenever there is a discussion or reference to Rohingya refugees and Afghan minorities and a number of Muslim minorities, Muslim refugees which are fleeing to Europe and America, that the 57 Islamic states talk about Muslim Brotherhood but are totally reluctant to accept any refugees even if they belong to the Muslim community. What are their responsibilities as a member of the global community? So, if they are questioning the rights of minorities in India, particularly the Muslims in India, then they need to peep into their own countries, in their own self, that what are you doing regarding Muslim refugees from Myanmar, from Afghanistan, from various other parts of the countries who are taking refuge or which are given refuge by Europe and America and not by the Islamic states. Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 drew global attention for its religious criteria, raising debates on consistency with international norms without realizing that the minorities which have been given special provision under CAA are those minorities which were prevented from entering into India under Nehru Liaquat Pact, and they were asked to stay back in Pakistan under the promise from the two head of the states, Nehru from India and Liaquat from Pakistan, their commitment and their promises to give security to these communities. However, after Liaquat's assassination, the Liaquat Nehru Pact went into futile. It was thrown into backbenches, and the minorities that stayed back there on the promise of Indian state that they will be given security and protection are facing massive discrimination, forced conversion, and other sorts of discrimination, and they want to come back to their parent country. So that was a historical wrong that was being corrected, and the process started way back during the Manmohan Singh government's period. Definitely, one needs to look into the history of any such act or decision while blaming the Indian state of any kind of discrimination. Well, transnationalism challenges traditional framework of citizenship, demanding flexible, right-based governance. But to what extent the state will be ready to bear the financial responsibilities of others, while the state is first committed to the financial responsibility of its own minorities. The CAA debate unnecessarily led to national and international debate without realizing that CA has nothing to do with the existing Muslim minorities in the country. So the community has to be wise enough before raising the issues and without before creating ruckus on any issues. They must go into the history and they must go into the political economy of a particular amendment act or particular law or particular decision of the government. International monitoring and India's human rights reviews. India participates actively in international human rights monitoring, submitting reports to the UN Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review and treaty bodies such as ICCPR Committee. The UPR 2022 acknowledged India's legislative framework but urged strong enforcement of minority rights and gender equality and measures against hate speech. The UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and OSCHR noted progress in education access but persistent social discrimination. India emphasizes its secular constitution and welfare schemes like PMJVK as compliance evidence. However, independent observers highlight concerns regarding rising intolerance and online misinformation. And intolerance is not only on the part of the majority but on the part of minority also. International monitoring encourages accountability while respecting sovereignty. India's engagement with the UN system strengthens transparency, showing that dialogue, not defensiveness, builds credibility. Global cooperation provides both challenges and opportunity to reaffirm India's democratic pluralism through evidence-based progress in ensuring equality for every community, be it minority or majority, under its constitutional and moral obligations. Civil society organizations are pivotal in translating minority rights from policy to practice. NGOs have played an important role in raising the issues of minorities. But there are NGOs which are under strict vigilance and charges of receiving extraordinary funds from the foreign countries in the name of minorities and distorting the issues of the minorities. So one has to be very cautious while relying on civil society movements and on the NGOs particularly, whether they are really working for the minorities or they are simply escalating the unnecessary issues and getting funds in the name of minorities. Globally, the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders protects activists advocating equality and justice. In India, civil society has mobilized to document hate speech, monitor relief in communal conflicts, and train journalists in ethical reporting. However, challenges include limited funding, legal restrictions, online harassment, misuse of the funds in the name of minority, collected in the name of minority, escalating unnecessary issues, politicizing the issues, etc., are to be taken into consideration. There are global examples such as Canada Community Partnership Funds or the EU's Rights and Value programs show how civic participation can improve minority inclusion. As said earlier many times, definitely the participation of the community and the change on the part of the community, change in their mindset, change into looking upon the issues and becoming more secular and democratic by not criminalizing every issue is also very, very important, as far as the, because even the responsibility of creating goodwill is also the responsibility of the minority community besides the majority community. Well, technology, AI ethics, and minority protection. AI has redefined how discrimination can manifest in modern societies. Biased algorithms in surveillance, recruitment, or content moderation can amplify inequality. UNESCO's recommendations on the ethics of AI and EU AI provide guiding framework emphasizing transparency, accountability, and fairness. India's national strategy for artificial intelligence recognizes inclusivity but lack binding ethical safeguards. Algorithmic profiling has raised concerns in policing and welfare delivery, potentially impacting marginalized groups. The Personal Data Protection Act introduces privacy protections but omits anti bias standards, ensuring digital justice now requires intersectional policy, combining technology governance with the social inclusion. Representation of minorities in tech design is essential to eliminate hidden bias. Globally, inclusive AI development is viewed as part of human rights. India's leadership in digital governance can set a model by aligning innovation with fairness, transforming artificial intelligence into an ally of equality rather than a silent barrier. Global media ecosystems have intensified identity politics, often polarizing minority representation. UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the EU Code of Conduct on Countering Illegal Hate Speech Online encourage balanced reporting and fact-based journalism. In India, media diversity has expanded digitally but remains limited in ownership and perspective. Minority representation in newsroom leadership remains under 5%. Misrepresentation in films, news debates, and social media fuels stereotyping and communal fear. However, there are instances when majority is misrepresented and their issues are misrepresented in films and media. That is equally wrong. Positive examples like BBC's diversity charter and AI Jazeera's global inclusion policy, and lots of you know media raising of issues regarding the misrepresentation of not only the minority but also the majority community. Hate speech is not only against minority community but also against majority community have become the issues, have become the major burning political issues that may in the long term lead to bigger schism between or bigger rift between the majority and the minority community within any domestic setup. Well, across the world, minority rights have evolved towards participatory equality. The European Union emphasizes structured anti discrimination mechanisms, while Canada and New Zealand implement multiculturalism through inclusive governance. But why these countries are now, uh, Europe, Canada, they all are shying away from multiculturalism, and now a new debate has emerged, that is the twilight of multiculturalism in Europe and America and a number of other countries, which are now discouraging refugees and immigrants as there is security and cultural threat to the natives, or there are economic factors to that. States uses affirmative action, whereas South Africa integrates equality into post-conflict reconciliation. India's model of secularism is distinct. It blends moral diversity with legal equality. Comparative insights reveals that strong institution, data transparency, and civic participation determine success more than ideology. Countries that treat diversity as an asset, not a challenge, achieve more cohesive development. India can also adopt, India has also already has a wonderful constitution, and it has evolved a number of other mechanisms to integrate, minority communities. But still, we can go ahead with the best, including the best practices like institutional monitoring, data audits, and intercultural education of UNESCO. International cooperation enhance domestic reform. Ultimately, we are a global village, and globalization and the revolution in the IT sector and communication technology has brought the world very close to each other, and we can have an equal globalized world with that cherishes the values of equality, cultural identity, etc., etc. Well, emerging global debates, climate, migration, and digital citizenship. New frontiers of minority rights now include environmental displacement, digital citizenship, and access to technology. Climate change disproportionately affects minority and indigenous communities, leading to migration and identity loss. The Paris Agreement 2015 and UN Declaration on Indigenous People 2007 recognize climate justice as a human rights issue. Digital citizenship debates around identity verification and internet access also influence equality. India's Aadhaar system promotes inclusion but raises privacy concerns. Globally, initiatives like the EU Green Deal and UN SDG 10 link climate actions with social equity. For minorities, access to uh, policymakers must integrate these cross-cutting issues into welfare planning. Sorry, for minorities, access to sustainable livelihoods, safe environments, and digital space are emerging civil rights. Policymakers must integrate these cross-cutting issues into welfare planning. The intersection of ecology, technology, and human rights defines the future of equality, demanding a holistic approach where inclusion is ecological, digital, and democratic at once, ensuring no community is left behind in humanity's collective progress. To conclude, the 21st century has transformed minority rights from legal protection to social participation. Global frameworks from UN to EU and OIC emphasize inclusion, accountability, and diversity. India's constitutional commitment to equality aligns with these ideals, but practice still trails promise. Combating hate speech, digital discrimination, and underrepresentation requires a rethinking about government efforts, civil society movements, and technology sectors. They need to work together to address these issues. Global lessons stress dialogue, not dominance, participation, not tokenism. India's plural democracy offers a moral foundation to lead by example, balancing cultural autonomy with universal rights, strengthening media diversity, AI ethics, and interfaith education can bridge divides, but a sense of responsibility and sense of duty on the part of minorities also is required to bridge the divide. The global shift towards inclusive governance reminds us that equality is not static. It must evolve with society. India's success will depend on realizing its constitutional vision. A democracy where every faith, voice, and identity coexist with dignity, under the rule of justice, freedom, and shared humanity. Let us all, the minority and the majority, work together to make a great India. Thank you.